Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Eryn Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, Dr. Eryn is back. She's been gone for, I think it was 2 weeks in a row.
It was not 2 weeks.
Yes, it was.
Was
It's
it?
2 weeks. 2 weeks in a row, she's been missing. She's been slacking. But she's going to take care of the next 2 weeks because we have the top do's and don'ts from doctors to parents. So basically, Dr. Eryn's going to go over today the top do's as a parent when it comes to your children and what she feels is the most important thing to do in regarding their overall health. So why don't you do us all a favor and give us your top do's, because we are soon to be parents and I need to know this shit.
Well, that's why I thought about this, right? Because I'm pregnant. I have a 10-year-old, but it's been a while since I've thought about some of these topics, and I wanted to look them up and to kind of have a discussion with you as well. So this will be a good public discussion.
Okay.
Because the first one is to get your children and yourself, if not, even as an adult, you should get vaccinated. So get all the vaccines. Even so, obviously, those are divided out in children, and the pediatrician usually has a schedule for those. They are highly recommended. And I know that there's been a lot of anti-vaxxers out there. And unfortunately, we've seen the results of that. And one of the results is measles, right? Because some of the people, anti-vaxxers, for example, aren't getting their children vaccinated with MMR, so measles, mumps, rubella. And, this is done shortly after birth and it's given in a series. But a lot of parents are choosing not to vaccinate their children. And we've seen the results of that with outbreaks.
Isn't there like a ton of vaccines they give to the child like right away?
Yeah.
Like a bunch of
As soon as they're
jabs
born.
all-
Yeah. As soon as you're
How many
born.
do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but there's
it's a lot.
There's a lot.
I
Yeah.
heard Joe Rogan talking about it and he was like, it's terrible what they do. And I'm kind of like, well, I believe in vaccines and I feel like we need them. They obviously help us with our health and combating these terrible diseases. But he was trying to make a point of like what happened to self-immunity and stuff like that.
Well, I wouldn't want to experience self-immunity to something like polio, for example, right? That was a disease that was eradicated and from the United States, essentially. And now we're seeing outbreaks of it in foreign countries. Some of the, I believe it's in Gaza, some of the children, there's a child that was afflicted with polio and who's paralyzed. That is something that you don't want to experience in your lifetime. And we have a perfectly preventable vaccine for it. And so I think to even consider reintroducing some of these diseases that could be deadly, I'm going to talk about measles, which compared to polio is a lot less severe as far as the long-term side effects. But yeah, I would definitely decide
I
on.
don't think you have to dive into like specific diseases and go into that. You just
Well, I
like,
think measles is the biggest one because there was a big myth before that somehow it was tied to autism, which was totally wrong. And the physician who wrote that paper uh, was well misinformed, and it's pretty common knowledge in the medical community that he was, kind of uh, downtrodden because of what he put out, and he basically made up stuff and published it. So, but a lot of people chose based on that misinformation, big, huge misinformation, to not vaccinate their children.
well, measles just kind of came back, didn't it? Like into the
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So like the latest outbreak was in Chicago, and it was really recent in June. And They had it was the largest outbreak since the 90s. They had a total of 67 measles cases reported during the outbreak. And then they had to basically contain it. So, and when they contain it, that is defined as no new cases reported for more than 42 days, which are 2 full incubation periods for measles. Um, Also, they had uh, basically the CDC looks at the outbreaks, across the country, and there have been 13 outbreaks of measles in 2024, and that's about 1,200 cases. So it's a lot, right? And the problem with measles is that it's really highly contagious. It spreads through respiratory droplets, and there's somewhat of an airborne transmission. And, acutely it can cause high fever, cough, runny nose. So it looks like a cold, red eyes, and then the distinctive rash, of course, that can cover the entire body. But the problem is that there are serious complications. So, especially for children, pneumonia happens in about 1 in 20 children with measles. Encephalitis, which is brain swelling, affects 1 in 1,000 cases, and that can cause permanent brain damage and death. So 1 to 3 per 1,000 children can actually die from this. The vulnerable populations are very susceptible to this, young children under 5 years old, adults over 20 years old, pregnant women, and anyone who's immunocompromised. The long-term side effects can cause subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is it's a fatal neurologic disease that can develop years after infection. So, think of it like you got over the measles, and then maybe years later, you get this rare neurologic issue. Um, so before there was widespread vaccination worldwide, there's an estimated 2.6 deaths annually from measles. So it is a serious disease. It can kill people, especially children. It weakens the immune system, and it's very risky for pregnancy. Anyone who's around that infection, and you got to think there's a lot of mothers out there that maybe might be pregnant and have a child, and if they choose not to get that child vaccinated, that puts them at risk. And there is no specific treatment. We just treat the symptoms. So there's no cure per se. So it's better to prevent, be on the prevention side.
And treat symptoms.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and it's difficult because the incubation period is so long, so it's usually spread before then. That's why you see these like huge outbreaks. And then the biggest one I think in our household is, without obviously there's other vaccines, but I wanted to focus on measles because that is one that we're seeing outbreaks of in the United States. But COVID is another controversial issue, especially in children. We've had this discussion ourselves. You didn't get vaccinated for COVID, and I did. But basically, let's talk about the recommendations. CDC recommends COVID-19 vaccines for everyone 6 months of age and older. Among children hospitalized for COVID-19, 50% had no underlying conditions. So I tend to think of, well, the people that really get sick and end up in the hospital usually have some other issue, like maybe they have asthma or some other chronic disease. But in reality, about 50% actually don't have their healthy kids. The vaccine is effective in prevention of hospitalization. There's lots of research out there now showing that. And I think the worrisome thing here too are the side effects. The biggest one being multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, or at least the one that's a little bit more obscure. This can cause multi-organ system failure, but the issue is that it can occur 2 to 6 weeks after the COVID infection. So
you're not saying that's with the vaccine That
No, these are kids that don't get vaccinated. And so if you get the infection,
Mhm.
this is a possibility. So again, the vaccine does prevent hospitalization.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say, I'm just going to say my 2 cents here. The reason why I didn't take it is because I felt, and this is my own personal opinion, that it was rushed. Um, and you could go into how long the research was. I don't really care. To me, it felt rushed. And I will say that you get more people regretting taking it than those who haven't taken it. I will say that, but it's to each their own, and whatever choice you made, that's up to you. Now, with our kid, I mean, if you're the doctor, you're the expert, so I'd have to lean on you.
well, what's interesting is that you can get COVID-19 vaccination in pregnancy. So, you can do that as well. It is actually one of the vaccines that is
You already got
recommended.
vaccinated? What do you mean, like a booster?
Yeah, like a booster. Because now there's a new version of the
Oh,
vaccination. I know
so
that
you don't
you
you don't
disagree
fix
with
something
that.
that's not broken right now. Everything's going good. You leave it. You just keep going.
Imagine bringing a newborn home and maybe um some visitor has it and they contract it.
Yeah, but then what are you gonna
Or
lose your
you,
life? Like you could walk outside and fall off a curb and hit your head and die. Like
but
they can't
there's
go outside and walk.
but this is very preventable.
So is watching where you walk.
I think that again, everyone's different, but
I'd say
I would
don't do it for the pregnancy. Like if you really want our child to get it, then do it when they're supposed to get it.
yeah, and that is an option. Just like there's uh RSV, there's different vaccines that they are doing a lot more research on, and there's some new vaccines out there. But again, these respiratory illnesses can cause serious complications,
Mhm.
especially in young infants.
Yeah.
So I think it's basically a risk benefit ratio, and you really have to understand that benefit, and I guess buy off on that benefit for you to be sold on that.
I'm not sold. So anyway,
And that's okay. Like some people believe that.
mhm.
Um, but I
10
guess
years down the road and it proves to be legitimate. Okay, I'll get it. Let the
I
research
just want to say that
continue to come
those
out.
kind like the mRNA vaccines have been out for 20 plus years. They're well researched. This is, any conspiracy theory out there that, you know,
The robots being built in your body by
I think there's more risk of people getting data off your phone than a chip being implanted. Yes. But we'll move on. We'll move on to the HPV vaccine.
Okay.
This one is interesting. This was introduced like after I graduated from medical school, and I thought was awesome. Um, they're offering it to children. I can't remember the low age range, but usually until like the teenage years. And now I think they extended the recommendation to if you are a single adult. I think up into your late 20s that you can still get it. And sometimes you can justify even getting it after that. But basically, HPV, they're human papillomas virus. There's many of them. There's certain types that cause cancer, more so in females, cervical cancer in particular. And that's why women get pap smears to kind of monitor for that. And now there's this vaccine and that has been around for a while now. I'd say in the 20-year range or plus that. And basically, it prevents getting those specific type of HPV strains that cause the cancer, and hugely beneficial for women. And I think every woman, child, female child, male child should get it because males tend to transmit it without knowing. It's usually asymptomatic in males. But unfortunately, females can get cervical cancer, and that is a big deal. I actually did a PET CT on a woman who had advanced cervical cancer and ended up succumbing to it. It can be a bad cancer. So now there's a prevention. We actually have vaccine that prevents cancer. I think that's a wonderful thing.
All right. So that was some good information with some vaccines. That was your number one to do.
Yeah.
What's your second to do?
All right. So my 10-year-old recently jumped in the front seat and said, I want to sit in the front seat. And so I had to look this one up because I thought he weighs like 75 pounds. He's a tall kid. And I thought, well, what's the risk of him actually getting injured in a car accident? So obviously for it's easier for infants, we kind of know you need to have car restraints. So I'm talking about car seats that are age appropriate. So you have the rear facing ones as long as you can get away with. It does prevent against major bodily harm, especially in small children.
Didn't they say that the rear facing was much safer than?
Yes, your rear facing is very safe. The current recommendation is age 3, and then you forward facing until about age 7. So you actually have them,
7 years old in a
in a car seat, yeah. And then a
getting
booster.
dropped off at school.
Yeah.
Look at this kid.
Yeah.
I,
And
I remember I was in the front seat. I don't even remember, but the parents would put him on the lap while you're
yeah,
driving and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's so dangerous. Booster until age 12,
All right.
depending on height and weight. Yeah.
This is so just gonna preference this. Um, if you're driving your kid to school and you're in the drop-off line, you might want to tell them to get out of the seats then, just for their social aspect.
I disagree. Why don't we make this the mainstream?
Because that'll take some
You
time.
shouldn't be
This
embarrassed.
podcast is
You,
not going to do that.
you shouldn't be embarrassed. But the main one that I came away with was backseat until the age of 13. And that doesn't even have to do with so much the weight requirements, it's also their bone structure. So like if they sit in the front seat, they'll just get crushed.
Yeah.
If they're under 13.
I can agree 100% with staying in the back seat for as long as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know about booster seats until you're 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
They
I'm
always
gonna get an adult booster
They always
seat
said
now.
that you can like tell the doctor's kids because and then which brings me to my next one. It's
Wait,
talking
wait,
about
don't,
helmets.
well, yeah, don't go there. Yeah, let me
Yeah.
finish this car restraint.
But they're always kind of the kids that are in restraints and wearing helmets and stuff like
So,
that.
staying on car restraints, what about seat belts?
So seat belts should always like when they're old enough
Well,
to
I'm talking about anybody.
Oh, always wear seatbelts,
Mm.
yeah. And always, it goes across your chest, and some people like to slip their arm um kind of over the strap that goes across your chest. Don't do that. That can actually cause a problem if you get in an accident. And then obviously you want to have the lap belt too.
Do you remember
They do
those seat
both.
belts that would just automatically go on you as you close the
Yes,
door?
I remember those.
That movie Beethoven, when he
Yes.
was trying to shoot Beethoven and
Yes.
the seatbelt got him. Beethoven survived. Mhm.
Yes, always wear a seatbelt. And I think most cars beep at you if you don't. Uh, but they do actually save people's lives and decrease injuries
Yeah.
and another one it's a kind of a nuance is if you have to go to the bathroom, empty your bladder before you get into a car. Because the worst thing you can do is get in a car accident with a full bladder. It can explode. Just FYI.
Well, new fear engaged with that.
So
Jesus.
always use the restroom.
Guys, keep a couple empty Gatorade bottles in your car, please.
So yeah, I on trauma call saw a lot of bad things with full bladders and car accidents.
Jesus.
Yeah, not
No,
great.
no.
Not great.
Yeah, great. I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight.
That's the thing is like with doctors, we see a lot of the bad stuff. So a lot of these recommendations seem very simple, but we see the most extreme cases of people not doing these things.
Yeah.
And then it basically instills a fear that, damn, that's why that's in place.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was car restraints. Let's go on to the third one that you were just going to touch on.
Yeah, so helmets, elbow pads, knee pads. Like I said, you can always tell the doctor's kids um, because they're always wearing all of the protective equipment.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is I see is little kids biking. Make sure they're wearing a helmet. Always, always. If they're on a bike, obviously you don't really want them on a road, but even on the sidewalk, even in your familiar neighborhood, always wear a helmet. You never know when they could fall off their bike and hit their head. And it's the best way to avoid any kind of head injury, is wearing that helmet. And again, maybe it doesn't look cool, but it is the best policy.
Yeah, I know my friends and I, we never wore like knee pads and elbow pads for biking, but for like skateboarding and stuff like that, we would throw on. If you were to skateboard, I never did that, but they would definitely have elbow pads, knee pads for that.
Yeah, if you can avoid and like wear, I call it personal protective equipment, PPE.
Just wrap
You
yourself
try
up with
to.
bubble wrap.
Yeah,
Like,
why
so
not? Just be very careful. It's better to
got
prevent a
freaking little
fracture.
giants.
It's
Yeah,
better to prevent fractures than to, and still you want to live your life, but also protect yourself. But helmets are the biggest thing, especially if you're doing any off-roading activities, any sports, even skiing, snowboarding.
mm,
Little kids should wear helmets, and even some adults, like depending on how, at risk, um, a risk taker you are. I think it's something to consider.
yeah. Just a note on snowboarding. If you're gonna go snowboarding and you've never done it before, make sure you get some like wrist wraps or wrist support because
See,
when you fall down and you land on your
yeah,
hands,
lots of risk factors.
yeah, like that's what happened to me. I didn't fracture my wrist, but I definitely sprained it. And then the instructor was like, "Oh, you're supposed to fall like with your hands, with your arms folded across your chest." And I'm like, "It's the end of the lesson when you're telling me now." And my wrists are all messed up. So I would definitely wear some wrist wraps if you're snowboarding. So let's go on to your last one.
So again, this one is very logical and pretty straightforward. Hand hygiene, and elbow
Especially
sneeze.
the kids, they put their hands in their
Yeah,
mouth all the time.
yeah. Make
Kids are
sure,
gross.
yeah, make sure you're always washing your hands. Teach them to wash their hands. Use alcohol wipes or the alcohol cleaner that you can, put throughout your house. Make sure that they're always doing that
Not
before they're.
overdo it though. Right? You don't want it in every room in the house.
No, but you can wash your hands,
Yeah.
and you can do that in every room.
Isn't it good to get just like building up like a natural defense, like having a kid, with dirty hands
I think they do that anyway because they go to school and they're
Yeah.
exposed to germs. And so you do want to minimize like how often you get sick. And that's honestly as we go into the winter season to flu season,
Yeah.
that's another one, flu vaccine. Um, make sure you're washing your hands, especially before you touch your face, before you eat, before you kind of do the personal grooming things that you do. Um, make sure you're doing that. Another thing is make sure that the surfaces that you are touching, even though you're washing your hands, are clean. So a good example is like when you go grocery shopping and you have like a little kid, and you're putting them in the grocery cart, those grocery carts are really, really dirty. So make sure you're wiping those down, wiping
This
their
sounds more
hands
like this
down.
sounds like an OCD you got going on.
No, I mean, it's a good way to prevent being sick, right? And I know you see like crazy people like on the airplanes and Clorox wiping
Well, I mean, I
their
do that.
seats
Don't
and
call me
stuff like
crazy.
that. But that's the same thing, right? I think the grocery cart's more is probably has way more bacteria on it than some of those seats.
Well, it's funny because like when I used to teach, I would teach biological hazards, and part of that section was infectious diseases, and the best way to prevent the spread of infectious diseases was washing your hands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the easiest, most logical way. And wiping surfaces down also helps. But I think the biggest thing is just make sure your hands are
I'll
washed.
tell you one thing I started, well, I've been doing this for a very long time. Um, is when I sneeze, I actually sneeze inside of my shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want it to spread everywhere. And plus, I
Yeah.
don't want people looking at
You
the
always
like
roll
a-
down the window too.
Oh, yeah, I do. If you sneeze in the car, I'm rolling the window now. That's it.
Yeah.
But sneezing inside my shirt, I know you said elbow sneeze,
Yeah.
but I would sneeze inside my shirt, just pull it over my nose and just sneeze in there.
Yeah. Whatever you can do to prevent the droplets from spreading.
Yeah.
Because
I'm getting everywhere.
yeah. Yeah. And
Did you ever
some
see that
people,
slow motion video of like someone sneezing?
yeah, I'm
It's
sure.
oh man.
Also, when you are sick, I know we learned this during COVID, but if you are sick and you're coughing and stuff like that, I think it's pretty respectful to wear a mask at this point, and so you're not spreading your germs, especially if it's like a constant cough and that sort of thing. And that I think that's just a general respect thing, so that we're not spreading germs. That's all I got.
Gotcha. Well, those are very important do's. Next week, we are going to be going into the don'ts. So Dr. Eryn's top don'ts from doctors to parents. So thank you guys for joining in. Give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Legion Athletics. They have all of their supplements backed by science. And the coolest thing about it is if you do not like the taste or you don't like their product, they give 100% money back guarantee. So if you don't like their taste of the protein powder, you could literally get a refund and then buy another flavor and get a better taste. So with that being said, we will see you all next week with
The don'ts.
with Dr. Eryn's top don'ts from doctors to parents. So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.